descending dread. With each step down the creaky stairs of the abandoned factory, my fear grew. The musty smell of old earth filled my nostrils as I descended into the dark cellar. My lantern barely lit the way as I ducked under beams and dodged turns. The air felt suffocating, like a weight pressing down on me. As I went deeper, I sensed something sinister watching me. Panic set in as I reached a dead end and heard scratching behind a crate. A gnarled hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with a vice-like grip. It was an old woman with wild eyes. Her tattered clothes hung on an emaciated frame, her face contorted with anger. She blocked my path, gripping my arm tightly and hissing for me to leave. But it wasn't just her. The darkness around me came alive, whispering with an otherworldly force. I struggled to break free, but her grip was surprisingly strong. As I fell backward, shadows slithered out of the corners of my eyes, their movements unnatural. The creatures closed in, their whispers growing louder. I ran towards the exit, my heart hammering. Moonlight filtered through the trees as I burst into an open clearing. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind me. I fumbled for my keys and dove into my car, locking the door behind me. As I drove away, the image of the strange creatures and the old woman lingered in my mind, haunting every waking moment. After days of research, I discovered that the alcove was a sacred site for an indigenous tribe until settlers desecrated it, angering spirits. With supplies and a knot in my stomach, I returned to the abandoned factory. As I explored the dark corridors, my senses heightened. Suddenly, a whisper brushed against my ear, and I spun around. There was nothing behind me. I continued forward, feeling a presence looming over me. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the silence. Brave and stupid, I ran towards it and found ghostly figures surrounded by a faint blue light. Before I could make sense of it all, they vanished. In the dim light, a figure emerged from the shadows, with inhuman features and glowing red eyes. Paralyzed with fear, I attempted to run, but I couldn't move. When my legs regained their footing, I stumbled and fell, striking my head on a pile of debris. Disoriented, I stood, running away from the wailing sounding behind me. The creature chased me through the factory. I came to an impasse at the end of a corridor. Cornered, I grabbed a metal pipe, prepared to fight for my life. I swung at its head, the metal making full contact with its skull, disorienting the creature long enough for me to find an exit and escape to the outside. The creature gave chase, still determined to attack me, and despite my best efforts, I knew I wouldn't defeat it. Suddenly, a helicopter appeared overhead with a searchlight and megaphone ordering us to surrender. I sprinted towards the light, ignoring the pain in my head. A soldier pulled me inside just as the creature was about to tear into my flesh with its jagged claws. In time, the adrenaline wore off. We landed at a medical facility where I was lucky to be alive, despite the severity of my wounds. The soldier who had saved me stayed by my side as I recovered, offering words of encouragement. As I healed, I couldn't help but think about how close I was to not making it out alive. I felt relief wash over me, but then the memories flooded back. The creature, the chase, the attack. What was that thing? I asked one morning, a week removed from my ordeal. It's an experimental project that escaped from a nearby lab, the soldier explained. We're still gathering information. Is it dead? I shuddered at the thought of it coming after me again. Yes, we made sure of it, the soldier assured. But then he asked for my help in understanding the creature. Despite my fear, I knew I had to do my part. I didn't want anyone else to suffer the same fate. So I agreed to tell him everything I could remember about that night. As I recounted my encounter with the creature, the memories flooded back. Its effortless movements and razor-sharp claws were etched in my mind. The soldier and a doctor listened, taking notes and nodding. The doctor suggested consulting experts, but that they should be careful to not cause panic or arouse any suspicions. I continued to recover, restricted to the bare and desolate setting of a former covert military facility that had been repurposed for renegades. The walls were made of cold, hard concrete, and the floor was lined with industrial-strength linoleum tiles. The room was sparsely furnished, with only a narrow cot for me to rest on and a small metal table by my bedside. Above me, fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, casting an eerie glow over my surroundings. It was clear that this was a base designed for secrecy and functionality, not comfort or luxury. Despite this, I couldn't help but feel grateful to be alive and under the watchful care of those in charge. Weeks passed by in a blur as I went through rigorous psychological assessments and rehabilitation sessions. Sergeant Daniels, the soldier who had rescued me, became an ever-present figure, checking on my recovery every day. He would often bring books and puzzles to keep my mind busy, attempting to distract me from the nightmares that haunted my dreams. During one of our conversations, Sergeant Daniels mentioned that the creature I encountered was not an isolated incident. There had been reports of similar encounters in different parts of the country. People were disappearing under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind only confusion and fear. It was clear that the government had been keeping this information hidden from the public. But why? What were they trying to protect? The questions swirled in my mind, demanding answers that seemed just out of reach. I grew restless, confined to the sterile walls of the medical facility. I yearned for some semblance of normalcy, for a chance to return to my life before all this happened. But deep down, I knew that my life would never be the same. The encounter with the creature had changed everything, and I couldn't simply go back to the way things were. One evening, as Sergeant Daniels sat beside me during our usual conversation, I mustered up the courage to ask him about the secrets that the government was hiding. His face tightened, a flicker of hesitation crossing his eyes. He sighed heavily before finally responding. "The truth is, there's more to this than what meets the eye," he started cautiously. "The government has been experimenting with genetic mutations and bioengineering for years. They were trying to create super soldiers, beings with enhanced physical capabilities and heightened senses." I stared at him in disbelief, my mind racing to catch up with his words. Super soldiers? Genetic mutations? It felt like I had stumbled into some sort of sci-fi nightmare. "But something went wrong," Sergeant Daniels continued. "The creatures that you encountered were once human soldiers who volunteered for the experiments, but they lost control of their humanity and became monstrous beings. The government lost control of them, and now they roam free, wreaking havoc wherever they go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was beyond anything I could have imagined. The government had turned men into monsters, and now innocent people were paying the price. "But why keep it a secret?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and fear. Sergeant Daniels looked away, his expression heavy with guilt. "The government doesn't want the public to know about their failed experiments. They fear the panic it would cause, the loss of trust in their ability to protect the country." I clenched my fists, my anger boiling over. How could they prioritize their reputation over innocent lives? "I need to do something," I said, determination heavy in my tone. "I can't just sit here knowing what's happening out there." Sergeant Daniels nodded in understanding, his eyes flickering with a mix of admiration and concern. "I understand your frustration, but you need to be careful. These creatures are dangerous, and the government will stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the path I had decided to take. I can't just let them continue terrorizing innocent people. I have to do something to stop this. Sergeant Daniels reached out and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "I admire your bravery, but you can't do this alone. We need a plan, resources, and allies who are willing to stand up against the government's corrupt actions." His words resonated with me. I knew I couldn't face this fight alone. I needed help, someone who understood what was at stake. "Are there others like me?" I asked. Sergeant Daniels nodded. "There are resistance groups scattered around the country, people who have been affected by the government's experiments and are fighting back. They want to expose the truth to the world." Relief washed over me, knowing that I wasn't alone in this fight. But I also understood the risks involved. The government had vast resources and would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. We would have to be careful and strategic in our approach. "I want to join them." Sergeant Daniels smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "I knew you would say that. I've already been in contact with some of these resistance groups. They'll be expecting us." A fire ignited in my veins, fueling me with an unbreakable determination as I readied myself for the upcoming battle. No longer a helpless victim, I had transformed into a ferocious warrior, fighting not only for my survival, but for the countless others who had been subjected to the government's cruel experiments. Their screams echoed in my mind, pushing me forward with an unrelenting fury. This was no longer just a fight for justice. It was a war against evil itself.